According to a recent blood test, I'm experiencing stage 3A kidney failure. Has bodybuilding ruined my life? Am I doomed to spend my declining days on dialysis? No. Well, how am I so confident? For starters, I took another blood test about 4 weeks after that previous blood test. And when I took that blood test, I was on a deload from my training, a break from my training. And lo and behold, I wasn't experiencing kidney failure according to that test. And more importantly, when I got that first test, I also had my Cystatin C evaluated. Cystatin C is another marker and perhaps a better marker for evaluating kidney health in well-muscled individuals. And according to that test, my kidney function was just fine. So what's going on here? Let me explain. This video is going to be divided into 4 parts. In the first section, I'm going to talk about the kind of tests that doctors typically perform to evaluate kidney health and how those tests can be skewed by diet, exercise, and muscle mass. In the second part, I'm going to talk about tests that athletes and bodybuilders probably should get to better assess their kidney health. Thirdly, I'm going to talk about how performance-enhancing drugs can potentially impact the kidneys. And lastly, if you stick around to the end, I'm going to detail some mitigation strategies you can employ to potentially protect your kidneys from harm. Let's dive in. This video is for educational entertainment purposes only. When you go to the doctor for a physical or a routine medical checkup, you're likely to get something called a comprehensive metabolic panel, the CMP. The CMP tests a number of variables in the body, and there are 3 variables that are best used to assess kidney health: BUN, creatinine, and EGFR. BUN, blood urea nitrogen, and creatinine are waste products that exist in the body. EGFR, your estimated glomerular filtration rate, best assesses your kidney function. The function of the kidneys in the body is to clear waste products from the blood and to remove excess fluids via urine. And when the kidneys are functioning best, EGFR is higher, and when kidney function is declining, EGFR is also declining. That's because EGFR measures the filtration rate, the ability of your kidneys to filter those waste products. But it's important to hone in on one of those words, estimated. Your EGFR is estimated. It is the estimate of your kidney's function. It is not a precise measurement. In fact, typically speaking on the CMP, the EGFR is based upon BUN and creatinine. It is not a direct measure of your kidney's abilities to filter waste products from your blood and excrete them via urine. It's not direct. And that means that if your BUN and creatinine is elevated for reasons that aren't related to kidney health, your EGFR is going to be skewed. Now, it is possible to get your glomerular filtration rate directly tested. There are tests to do this, things like insulin clearance and radioisotope tracers. But these methods are costly and rarely, if ever, performed. The most common test you're going to get is the CMP. And the most common way your doctor is going to evaluate your kidney function is via EGFR derived from BUN and creatinine. So what is BUN and creatinine? BUN, or blood urea nitrogen, measures how much nitrogen from urea, a protein breakdown product, is floating around in your blood. Generally speaking, if your kidneys aren't clearing waste efficiently, BUN goes up. Since urea is made in the liver, low BUN can sometimes flag liver issues. Hydration plays a role too. Dehydration raises BUN and overhydration lowers BUN. And of course, diet directly impacts BUN. High protein intake, GI bleeding, and catabolic states can increase BUN. So for athletes, for people like me, BUN is often elevated. Because athletes consume lots of protein, they are often in catabolic states due to training and experiencing heightened muscle protein breakdown, which means that there's excess nitrogen floating around in their blood. Creatinine is similar. It's a waste product from muscle metabolism, specifically the breakdown of creatine phosphate. Creatinine is filtered almost entirely by the kidneys, so if creatinine builds up in the blood, that can point to impaired kidney function. But here's the catch. Creatinine is often tied to muscle mass. The more muscle you carry, the more likely it is that your creatinine will rise. So when taken together, it's easy to understand why on paper, athletes might have a depressed EGFR, because athletes, bodybuilders, and well-muscled individuals are likely to have elevated BUN and creatinine numbers. And this is perfectly evident in me. I actually have very, very clear evidence of this because I have blood tests going back for years. Right now on screen, I'm showing a blood test from April 2014. At this point in time, I wasn't really lifting. I think I was doing some moderate calisthenics. And you can see that my eGFR is good. My BUN is slightly elevated, but my creatinine is right in range. Again, I was doing some lifting at this time, so it's possible I was experiencing some elevated degree of catabolism, of muscle breakdown, and thus my BUN was slightly elevated. But the point is, I wasn't a serious lifter here, and my eGFR was quite good. However, if we fast forward about a year, this test was taken in December 2015, and my eGFR has plummeted. It is significantly lower, and my creatinine is significantly higher. How did this happen? Did I experience a traumatic kidney injury? Did I start taking heroin? No, I just started lifting seriously and I gained like 15 pounds of muscle. And you can see this on this test. It's very clear. This is from 10 years ago. I was 29 at the time. There is no other rational explanation to explain my kidney function decline other than the fact that I began lifting. It is clear as day. And no, this doesn't mean that my kidney function actually declined. This just means that I got bigger and I had more muscle, and thus there was more creatinine floating around in my blood. My kidneys were fine then, just like they're fine right now. And why am I so confident? Well, because throughout this period of time, I've also gotten my Cystatin C tested. What is Cystatin C? It's a small protein produced by nearly all cells, and unlike creatinine, cystatin is not strongly affected by muscle mass, sex, or diet. This makes it a much more reliable marker in athletes. Doctors can calculate eGFR based upon cystatin C alone, or combine it with creatinine to get an even more accurate picture. It's particularly helpful if you're muscular, elderly, or have liver disease. Now, cystatin C isn't perfect either. It can be influenced by thyroid function, by hyper or hypothyroidism, and by inflammation in the body more generally. So context is still key. Additionally, athletes who have elevated creatinine levels and normal cystatin C levels should get their urine tested to see if there's any protein floating in the urine. If there is, this is clear evidence that kidney function is impaired. Now, it's important to note that protein in the urine is something that happens in later stages of kidney disease, so it's not an early indicator, but nonetheless, it's something you should get tested for peace of mind just to ensure that your kidneys are truly working fine. Now, let's talk about performance-enhancing drugs and kidneys. Anabolic steroids are not directly nephrotoxic. They are not directly harmful to the kidneys. They don't poison kidney cells the way aminoglycosides and cisplatin do, but they can cause damage indirectly. Focal segmented glomerular sclerosis has been linked to anabolic usage, particularly in massive bodybuilders. Steroids can raise blood pressure, which can directly negatively impact the kidneys over time. That increased pressure can damage the nephrons, the glomeruli, the structures of the kidneys. Relatedly, steroids increase red blood cell count through a process called erythropoiesis. This increased viscosity, this increased blood thickness can put additional pressure on the kidneys. Lastly, and also relatedly, steroids can also negatively impact cardiovascular and lipid health. And the cardiovascular system is deeply intertwined with the renal system. When one fails, the other typically does as well. And thus, the cardiac damage caused by steroids can have negative secondary impacts on your renal system. Again, it's clear that steroids can have deleterious effects upon the renal system, but it's not clear that there's any direct mechanisms. There is some scant evidence that boldenone, equipoise, can damage the kidneys directly, but it's not actually clear if that literature truly applies to humans. Additionally, anecdotally, some users attest that trenbolone can inflame the kidneys, but again, there's no clear mechanism as to why that would be. It's worth drilling down on this point because there are in fact drugs and substances that are directly nephrotoxic, and steroids just simply aren't among them. Here's a list of some substances that are directly toxic to the kidneys. Certain antibiotics like aminoglycosides and vancomycin, antifungals like amphotericin B, chemotherapy drugs such as cisplatin and methotrexate, immunosuppressants like cyclosporine, contrast dye from imaging studies, heavy metals, lithium, cocaine, heroin, endogenous molecules in excess like myoglobin, hemoglobin, uric acid, or light chains, and even some herbal products. One final note here on steroids. Again, it's not clear that there's a direct mechanism, a direct way that steroids harm the kidneys. However, I did note that an excess of endogenous molecules can damage the kidneys. I think it's fair to say that excessive doses of steroids, well above anything prescribed by a doctor, could certainly have direct negative ramifications on the renal system. Generally speaking, bodybuilders and athletes take steroids to improve athletic performance and to increase muscle mass. Muscles have androgen receptors, and those androgen receptors are finite. They upregulate in the presence of exogenous androgens, in the presence of steroids, but they are still finite. And if and when one's dosage exceeds the available number of receptors, it's possible and even likely that those androgens will then proliferate throughout the body and attach to the receptors in other organs, among them the kidneys. So dosage is king. Lastly, on the topic of performance-enhancing drugs, I would be remiss if I didn't also mention HGH, or human growth hormone. Growth hormone and IGF-1 by proxy aren't directly toxic either, but they do increase kidney workload by causing glomerular hyperfiltration. This chronic overstimulation can lead to proteinuria, kidney enlargement, and potentially decline. Together, steroids and GH can synergize kidney strain, and so it's important for bodybuilders to be mindful of this and to avoid things like dehydration and excess use of NSAIDs. Lastly, what can bodybuilders and athletes do to best protect their kidneys? The most important thing you can do is to monitor and control your blood pressure. As I said earlier, anabolic steroids can directly increase blood pressure, and you can mitigate this. There are a myriad ways to help control your blood pressure, including regulating your electrolyte intake, engaging in regular cardiovascular exercise, and, if necessary, pursuing direct medical intervention. There are a number of sophisticated blood pressure medications that tend to have low side effect profiles that can be very useful for bodybuilders, among them ARBs like telmisartan. You should always work with a doctor to address these issues, but don't be afraid to be proactive. Blood pressure is a silent killer. You're not going to feel your blood pressure increasing over time, but it absolutely will degrade kidney function. And once you have truly harmed and damaged your kidneys, there's no coming back. Those tissues do not regenerate. And so the best line of defense you have is offense, by ensuring that your blood pressure stays in check. Secondly, you need to manage blood sugar. Diabetes is the leading cause of kidney failure worldwide. Bodybuilders who use things like HGH, bodybuilders who engage in year-long bulks, are likely to experience declines in insulin sensitivity. You need to mitigate against this and ensure that your blood sugar stays in check and doesn't degrade your cardiovascular or renal system functioning. Thirdly, stay on top of your hydration. This doesn't just mean consuming enough water. You also need to be mindful of your electrolyte balance. Most people underconsume potassium and overconsume sodium. Potassium is most commonly found in fruits and vegetables, things like spinach and blueberries. So the solution here is pretty easy. Eat more fruits and vegetables and consume more potatoes as your form of carbohydrate. This will help to ensure that your potassium levels are higher and that your electrolytes are more in balance. Additionally, if you're a bodybuilder preparing for a competition and you're intending to use diuretics, if you're intending to use substances that dry the body out, be careful. Work with a physician, work with a qualified medical professional to ensure you're not going to cause irrevocable damage to your renal system. In fact, diuretic use is one of the most common causes of death for bodybuilders. It's the most acute cause of death. And this is the result, ultimately, of electrolyte balances and a failure of the renal system. So stay on top of your electrolyte intake and stay on top of your hydration. Fourthly, do everything you can to preserve and improve your cardiovascular health. This means doing cardio, avoiding smoking, avoiding saturated fats, consuming fibers, taking supplements like fish oil. Doing everything you can to ensure your cardiovascular system is strong and robust will pay dividends in terms of preserving your kidney health. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, you need to monitor your kidney health regularly. This means checking your blood pressure perhaps every day. This means getting regular blood tests and potentially ultrasounds and CT scans. You need to ensure you're not doing damage, and if you start to do damage, you need to know that damage is occurring so you can stop doing whatever you're doing that's causing that harm. Be proactive. Don't hide your head in the sand. Modern medicine is available at your fingertips. You're watching a video right now on YouTube on this topic. So don't be afraid to take actual steps to improve your health. And the best and most important thing you can do is to tangibly monitor your health via blood work, imaging, etc. You'll notice I haven't listed supplements as an option here. There aren't really very many good kidney-specific supplements that help to support renal function. The most popular and widely used substance is something called astragalus root. Astragalus root can help to reduce inflammation and protect the kidneys, but results are very uneven. Part of this has to do with the fact that astragalus is literally a root, and depending on where you're sourcing it from and how it's being handled, it may be of higher or lower quality. It's also hard to determine dosing, and it just hasn't been studied to the same extent as other medications. So while I'm not saying that astragalus root doesn't work, it really isn't and shouldn't be your first line of defense. You really should focus more on the other things I've listed, like managing your blood pressure, hydration, and getting regular testing. Thanks so much for watching. One final note in closing. I want to be clear here, I'm not seeking to denigrate the medical establishment. Just because my blood tests indicate I'm experiencing kidney failure doesn't mean the medical system is failing me. The truth is, the medical system is designed to treat the average person. And I am not an average person. If you're an athlete, if you're a bodybuilder, you're not an average person either, and the system isn't going to help you. Additionally, the medical system in the United States isn't about proactive care. It's about making sure people don't die. It's not about helping people avoid illness. It's about helping them avoid catastrophe. And so if you're trying to be proactive, the medical industry just isn't designed to suit your needs. And so I urge you, to the extent you can, take matters into your hands. Find a qualified medical professional, tell that person what you need, work with them to find solutions that work for you. Thanks again for watching. If you found this video useful, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Appreciate you.